Ladies, gentlemen, and tarnished of all ages, when it comes to throwing things together in Elden Ring, there are tons of different ways to do it, and everyone has their own sort of charm to it. Some also have that charm while being absolute powerhouses, some a little bit less so. So today's entry is definitely on the upper end of that spectrum. If not quite the highest damage thing that you've ever seen, it is still pretty damn good, and it makes use of some fun bits of niche mechanical knowledge as well. Today is going to be about the Backhand Blades, and the Backhand Blades, and also the Backhand Blades. We're wielding 3 pairs of the exact same weapon, and they have each their own unique purpose within the setup, and using more than one of these actually makes a lot of sense once you understand it, so let's dive into the why of it all. Backhand Blades are just an incredibly strong weapon to begin with, added in with the DLC. The moveset is great, and the base version of this specifically has great dexterity scaling as well. You can apply any sort of statuses to these also on top of that, and a fun little thing that you may not know about Elden Ring is if you use a paired weapon, which is anything that goes in both hands when you two-hand it like the Backhand Blades, the status value of an attack with both blades is lower than if you had separate weapons in each hand and used power stance attacks with the same status buildup on it. This means if you are aiming for status buildup as a main part of the build, you are actually better off wielding 2 separate weapons than using paired weapons of the same type, with the general cost being a bit more weight load and more stamina cost per weapon swing as well, as opposed to just paired weapon attacks. Also, you'd lose your paired heavies, but those aren't usually important to specifically status buildup. As well, the Backhand Blade weapon type has some really strong and interesting Ashes of War that were added in the DLC as well, with today's main one being Swift Slash. What this is and what it does is it sort of dashes you forwards and then leaves a number of wind slashes through the air behind you, and it's interesting to know that every part of the damage of this weapon skill will actually apply a bit of status as well, specifically the one that is on the weapon that the Ash is on too. So again, it works well for our status purposes, and specifically also has a ton of movement on it, which means that you can often use it to both avoid damage and sneak in a hit where otherwise you would have needed to roll. That said, that is excellent for applying statuses, so we double that up by having multiple different statuses on our different Backhand Blades, specifically Bleed and Frostbite, with the main goal being to start a fight by applying Frostbite first, then go into town with the Bleed Blades while the enemy has the Frost debuff on them, building up multi-hit bonuses to actually follow that up. That said, let's dive into everything that you need to know to make all of this happen. The weapons and where to get them, the armor of choice, the Talismans, Wonderous Flask upgrades, spells, and of course the stats that you need as well to hit the damage numbers that I'm hitting, with the caveat that of course I'll assume that you already have any parts of the build that are from the base game. First things first then, the weapons, Backhand Blades. These come from the little mausoleum that is located right here in the Gravesite Plains, accessible super early. However, for this build in an optimal version of the setup, you will want 3 of these exact same weapon, even though there are 2 of them in each one of them that you have, and you can only hold 1 in each hand as well. That said, you can get extra pairs of these either from a friend that is willing to give you theirs, either their only copy or they can use save backups to get it back, and failing that, the one that we have set to cold can technically be Smithscript Circ instead, as the main purpose of it is applying frostbite, not damage. It just wouldn't be as good as having more Backhand Blades, which would be higher damage. That said, let's talk about the various Ashes of War for the setup. On one pair of Backhand Blades wielded in your right hand, you want Swift Slash as an Ash of War, and you want to put Cold Affinity on the weapon to give it frostbite buildup. To get Swift Slash, you have to side with Hornsent in the invasion against Leda that happens inside of the Shadow Keep, down the elevator from the storehouse first floor, Site of Grace, that you can access quite early in your progress through here once you've actually progressed their NPC storylines to the right point. You can duplicate the Ash of War once you get it with Hugh in the Round Table Hold, and then you can apply that second Swift Slash to another pair of Backhand Blades, this time with Blood Affinity, and this will be your second right hand slot. Once you apply Frostbite, we want to switch off of the cold weapon, as it just does less damage, and you can't reapply Frost, well, Frost is already applied anyways, so we take advantage of the bonus damage by just going double Bleed Swords, which is as a combo with the third Backhand Blades that are now in our left hand, which has the Crag Blade Ash of War set to Blood Affinity. This increases the physical damage and poise damage of your left hand weapon by a reasonably high amount, and just adds a bit extra on top given that we get more status buildup from using 2 separate bleed weapons anyways. Then past that, you also want a seal, and the best one for our stat spread is the Dragon Communion Seal, which scales with Arcane as well as Faith. Past that, we have our armor, and you definitely want the White Mask Helmet for a 10% boost to damage after a bleed occurs nearby for 20 seconds. Then for pure offensive min-maxing, you would go with 3 pieces of the Rakshasa armor set for a 6% bonus to damage done, or alternatively you can go fashion or just heavier damage negation, which you might need to against some bosses. To get the Rakshasa set, then you have to kill the boss at the Eastern Nameless Mausoleum, located just east of the Recluse River downstream, Site of Grace. Then we have our Talismans, the Shard of Alexander, just for a casual 15% boost to the damage of Swift Swift Slash itself. It's not the core of our build, but we use it enough that it is worth one slot, really. And then we have the Lord of Blood's Exaltation for a 20% boost to damage after a bleed occurs nearby for 20 seconds, Rotten Winged Sword Insignia Talisman for a boost to all damage done as you hit multiple times in a row before stopping your combo, and then Millicent's Prosthesis for a smaller version of the same buff, but with 5 bonus dexterity on top of that too. Following that is our Wondrous Flask buffs, inside of which we have the Thorny Cracked Tear for another bonus to damage with successive hits, and then in your other slot you want either the Bloodsucking Tear for 20% bonus damage at the cost of some health drain, or against harder hitting and longer lasting bosses like Radahn specifically, you probably want to swap this out for something like the Opaline Hard Tear, just for some extra damage negation. Then we have our spells for the build, Golden Vow for a 15% boost to all damage done and 10% boost to damage negation for 80 seconds after casting. Then Flame Grant Me Strength for a 20% boost to physical and fire damage for 30 seconds after casting. This takes up the body buff slot, and it is arguable that there is a better use for that in this build with the Sacred Bloody Flesh consumable, but given that we don't start building up bleed properly until after we apply frost, this is not generally better to use except to reapply a buff mid-fight, as it's much easier to just eat a bit of flesh in the middle of a fight than it is to reapply Flame Grant Me Strength. Finally, for our spells then is Bestial Vigor, just because we have the Faith and it's an unused buff slot, so we may as well get that little bit of health regeneration on top too. With all that covered then, let's talk about our levels and how to spend them. You want 60 Vigor, then 55 Dexterity. This will show up as 60 on your stat screen because of the +5 from our Talisman, which is a good Dexterity soft cap stopping point. You want at least 20 Endurance, but I find because of the multi-hit nature of the weapon, it feels better to have a bit more, which is why mine is higher than that, and then 25 Faith for our spells, and the rest into Arcane. If you are higher than level 150, you would want to level Arcane to 45, then pump Dexterity up to 80, with Talisman included of course, then further points into Arcane for the minimal remaining damage gain. And now that you know how to put this all together, let's talk about how to actually use it as well as the pre-fight buff order. You want to start off before larger enemies by using Bestial Vigor as it lasts 80 seconds, then Golden Vow, which also lasts for 80 seconds, then you want to drink an FP Flask, use Flame Grant Me Strength, swap to your left-hand sword, and then two-hand it to use the skill to apply Cragblade to that weapon. Swap it back to being one-handed so that you have the Frostblade in your right hand and then the Bloodblade in your left, drink another FP Flask, drink your Wondrous, then enter the boss room. Start the fight by taking advantage of the mobility of Swift Slash to apply Frost buildup, but you can also just use Power Stance weapon attacks if the openings are smaller. If it is a boss with a cutscene transition, it often isn't actually worth applying Frostbite in the first phase, just because it drops off automatically when that happens, but in this case, or once Frost is actually applied, swap right hand to the other Blood Blade so that you now have a blood applying Swift Slash in your right hand and Power Stance with the other Blood Blade in the left hand. So Swift Slash for movement, swinging swords just in general, a bunch within openings to stack your multi-hit bonuses for massive physical damage gain. That just about does it for today then everyone, a full guide to the general Grievous 6-blade status build-up sword build. I hope you've really enjoyed this then, and I hope you enjoy using this for yourself too if you actually try it out. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.